So record to the cloud. We're recording. So you all know me. I'm Nick. I've been here for 13 months or so now. But what I'm going to talk to you about is the work I did before I came here. I spent 9-10 months working in interreligious and ecumenical dialogue. I worked with Jewish people, with Muslims, and with non-Catholic Christians, primarily. Most of my work was done with Muslims. I actually have my academic background before, like what I studied in college was comparative religion, Christianity, Islam. So if you have questions about other religions, I probably can't answer them unless they're about Islam, just so you know. So, because we're going to talk about other religions in the context of what we believe as Catholics and how we do this. I don't know enough specifics about non-Catholic traditions to actually answer specifics about them besides Islam. Also, so some of it's going to be about the history of the church, some of it's going to be about my work, and some of it's going to be about my life. So I got a PowerPoint, which I will share my screen with you. And we're a small enough group that you can interrupt me if you have questions. Okay?
Okay.
Share screen. You're looking at my screen. This is my Outlook email, which I had open because in case people were trying to get in touch with me if they couldn't get it. But now we're done. So we're going to talk slideshow from. So the framing we're going to use, the story, which will be our base, is the Good Samaritan. It's a story I imagine you know, but we're going to read it anyway. So our background, I told you my professional background, I told you my training, and in my professional and academic work, I would often go to non-Catholic places of worship, and you don't participate in the liturgy in the same way, but I would like sit and watch. I've been to Episcopalian places of worship. I've been to synagogues. I've been to mosques. So, how do we do that? What can we pray? Where does praying create conflict? Those kind of things. So, I'm well trained in this area I'm talking about. The only reason I say all that is just for you all to understand that I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not talking with no background. So before we do any of this, I'm going to reread the story of the Good Samaritan, which I have up on my phone because that's easier to get to than my Bible. So a reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. But wishing to justify himself, he said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied and said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among robbers, and they stripped him and beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. And by chance, a priest was going down on that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise, a Levite also, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, who was on a journey, came upon him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion, and came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them, and put him on his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, he took out 2 denarii, and gave them to the innkeeper, and said, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay you.' Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the robber's hands?" And he said, "The one who showed him mercy toward him." Then Jesus said to him, "Go and do the same." The Gospel of the Lord. So, as you all probably know, I know Father Dan's preached on it. Samaritans were despised by most Jewish people in Jesus's day. The Samaritans were viewed as not a member. They were viewed. They had different religious beliefs that were related somehow to the Jewish people, but not identical. So Jews were advised to not interact with Samaritans for the risk of learning things they shouldn't, of coming to conclusions about God they shouldn't, that kind of thing. This can be applied to many people in our own context. You'll often hear versions of this story that place us in modern day and replace the Good Samaritan with an undocumented immigrant, for example, or that tell us to be the Good Samaritan and to break across and serve anyone. But I want to tell you a story about my own life. So I was doing the math. I was 24, I think, fresh out of grad school, starting my first job, something that everybody goes through. I moved, almost 6 hours away from my parents, closer than I lived in Florida, but still not a reasonable distance, and I don't have any friends. And I don't know anybody in the area. It's getting nowhere, and it ends up getting worse that I'm struggling in my job. There are some issues I'm having with just like elements of stuff that is just really hard for me. Was higher proportion of that job than I anticipated. But I'm working with the local mosque. I do a lot of work with them, and conveniently, actually, my apartment is only an hour away from the mosque. Not an hour, a mile. I could walk to the mosque if I really had to. It was about a 3-minute drive. So I would, but I'm having trouble. The job is not as ministerial as I like. Just a bunch of administrative stuff I'm not very good at. And I'm having trouble. So I'm sad, I don't have any friends really to go hang out with. Like when I lived in Florida, I lived with people my age. I live alone. All my friends are out in Boston, in New Jersey. And I'm, struggling in my job. And what ends up happening is that the people who welcome me, who take me into their community, are the people at the mosque. My Muslim friends, they're older, I know them from work, but they introduce me to their kids who are my age, who we can actually hang out with. They give me great food, kind of spicy. They're from Pakistan, so spicy for my taste, but good food. They even invite me to a fundraiser one night. They're raising money for orphans in Pakistan. Just invite me to come hang out. They're like, you don't have to give any money. Just come by. We're going to eat dinner. There's going to be a comedy show. It'll be fun. Or maybe it was the basketball tournament. I don't know, something like that. So just come by and watch. And, I'm there, a Christian, just hanging out at this mosque, making friends and feeling not so alone, not so struggling. I imagine being the guy beaten on the side of the road because I don't have any friends. I'm struggling at my job, and this group of Muslims, the people at the local mosque, taking me in, and to being the ones who put me on their donkey and taking me to the end. So the Good Samaritan story, I'm really able to apply to it. So when we talk about building friendships with people who aren't Catholics, it's really personal, because some of the people who have treated me the best in my entire life were Muslims, from primarily Pakistan. Others are from Bangladesh, but that part of the world. So like the Good Samaritan, I imagine, as a good way to frame our conversation, because Jesus uses people who aren't from his religious group to talk about building relationships. And I have that experience too. I know Muslims have been the Good Samaritan to me. So with that framing, we're going into our conversation. So most of our talk about actual Catholic teaching is going to come from Vatican II. Many of you are older than me and might remember the church before Vatican II. If you were in your 20s when Vatican II happened, many of you were probably around my age now when Vatican II happened. So you might remember. What I've heard from people is that they were told not to go to Protestant churches and, that kind of thing. Like, Even if it's a funeral, don't go in the Protestant. Like, I don't know that, but that's what people have told me. It's not what the church thinks anymore. I just want to make that clear. And this developed around Vatican II. And there's 4 major documents, which I listed in the wrong order here, but that's okay. They are Lumen Gentium, Nostra Aetate, Gaudium et Spes, and Unitatis Ratio. Bunch of fancy Latin. I'm going to explain them. And basically, these 4 documents allowed for me to do the work I did and allowed for me to make friends with my non-Catholic friends. And since Vatican II, there's been other stuff developed, which I'm going to recommend. So first, we're going to read from Lumen Gentium. Lumen Gentium is it's a really long document that the church wrote closer to the beginning of the Second Vatican Council. It's called the Constitution on the Church. I'm going to read it out loud. I know the words. But I wanted to write the whole thing. This is the 16th paragraph, or if like the way church documents are set up is that they are divided into paragraphs so you can cite them, like title, and then there's a point. This is from 16. So, finally, those who have not yet received the gospel are related in various ways to the people of God. In the first place, we must recall the people to whom the testament and the promises were given, and from whom Christ was born according to the flesh. On account of their fathers, this people remains most dear to God, for God does not repent of the gifts he makes, or of the calls he issues. This is very clearly speaking of the people of Israel, the Jewish people, and it states that God still loves them. God loves Jewish people, is what this document. But the plan of salvation also includes those who acknowledge the Creator. In the first place amongst these, there are the Muslims, who, professing to hold the faith of Abraham, along with us, adore the one and merciful God, who on the last day will judge mankind. Nor is God far distant from those who in shadows and images seek the unknown, for it is he who gives all men life and breath and all things, and as Savior, wills that all men be saved. Those also can attain to salvation, who through no fault of their own do not know the gospel of Christ or his church, yet sincerely seek God, and, moved by grace, strive by their deeds to do his will, as it is known to them through the dictates of conscience. Nor does divine providence deny the helps necessary for salvation to those who, without blame on their part, have not yet arrived at an explicit knowledge of God, and with his grace, strive to live a good life. Whatever good or truth is found amongst them is looked upon by the church as a preparation for the gospel. She knows that it is given by him who enlightens all men, so that they may finally have life. But often men, deceived by the evil, have become vain in their reasonings and have exchanged the truth of God for a lie, serving the creature rather than the Creator. Or some there are who, living and dying in this world without God, are exposed to final despair. Wherefore, to promote the glory of God and procure the salvation of all these, mindful of the command of the Lord, preach the gospel to every creature, the church fosters missions with care and attention. A lot going on there. Basically, what it's saying is that our non-Christian friends, in first place, the Jews, those who are Jewish, in second place, the Muslims, and in third, all those who attempt to follow God and live good life are related to us. We care about them, and they can, under certain conditions known only to God, receive salvation. That's what this says. This whole document is about the nature of the church. We all bound as the body of Christ. This is the part I pointed out because it's the only part that's relevant to Interreligious Dialogue, or the part that's most relevant. But realistically, the most important document for Interreligious Dialogue in the history of the church was written in 1965. It is called Nostra Aetate, which translates to in our time. And what happened was, so the Second Vatican Council occurred less than 20 years after the SHOL, after the Holocaust. And many bishops came to the Second Vatican Council realizing that Christian anti-Semitism, Christians believing that they were better than Jews, was one of the factors that led to the Second Vatican Council, that led to the Holocaust. Many people were like, we shouldn't have to worry about that. We're better. They rejected God. They killed Jesus, which is obviously not the teaching of the church. So it was going to begin by being a response to Christian anti-Semitism. But as they were debating and drafting the document, the bishops realized that they want to apologize for what happened in the Shoah. But if they say that if they don't have positive theology about other religions as well, something similar could happen again. We don't want to have Christian anti-Islam, Christian Islamophobia, Christian anti-Buddhist beliefs, because if that's the case, then we might just get another genocide against Muslims or against Buddhists, and that's not okay. So it's a really short document. You could read the whole thing in like 7 minutes. Paragraph 1 is about religion in general, about the church affirming that people who search for God are doing a good thing. And it goes closer, as it gets later, it goes to the religions we believe as Catholics are closer to us. Paragraph 2 is about the major Eastern religions of the world, primarily Hinduism and Buddhism, and other smaller religions, acknowledging that they strive to live virtuous lives, they try to do good things, those kind of things. Paragraph 3 is about Islam. It acknowledges that Muslims profess to hold the faith of Abraham, which is true. They acknowledge Abraham as their father. It acknowledges that they do good works, that they believe in the same God as us, though they refuse to acknowledge Jesus as God. They still believe in the God who spoke to Abraham. It also acknowledges their devotion, and it even acknowledges that many Muslims call on Mary with devotion, just like Catholics. It does recognize that we obviously have differences theologically with them, but that we can work. It also states that it recognizes that there's been a lot of violence between Christians and Muslims in the history of the world. Of course, from all the way back in 700 in Spain through the Crusades, even up to today, there remains violence, but the church says, please, no more violence with Muslims. Paragraph 4 is about Judaism, assigning that they were the first to hear the voice of the people of God. The first people to hear the voice of God, I said that wrong, speaks highly of them, says that God has not left them alone. And then paragraph 5 is about all those who aren't religious people of good world. The church wants to work with the people of the world. This is basically the framework under which modern interreligious dialogue exists. Its goal is to live out Nostra Aetate, to bring goodwill, and to hopefully promote peace, because we know that Christ doesn't want violence. And it calls out the 4 other largest religions of the world that are not Christianity: Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, and Judaism in particular. Then the Second Vatican Council also talked about ecumenism. So ecumenism is the word for the movement to restore Christian unity. That's what we call it. There are, as you know, many kinds of Christians in the world. There are Catholics, there are Protestants who have all sorts of different denominations and all sorts of disagreements within themselves. There are Orthodox who are who exist primarily in the East, and then there are Anglicans who are in the US. We call them Episcopalians, but there are many other Anglicans in the world. And then there are other kinds of people who identify as Christians, but are a little, but we have larger disagreements with people like the Latter-day Saints, like the Seventh-day Adventists. So this document affirms that the Catholic Church is the church Christ established. It doesn't deny that, but it admits that when divisions have happened among Christians, that it wasn't all their fault. The Catholic, like the Reformation, the schism, the Great Schism with the Orthodox, it states men on both sides have been at fault. So Catholics can't just say, oh, you Protestants, you're always wrong. We have to admit that what led to the schism, what led to the debate, is partly our fault. And it hopes that Christians can be unified, because our greatest issue in promoting Jesus Christ to the world is that we're not unified. A non-Christian looks at how many different kinds of Christians there are and says, why would I become a Christian? Like, you guys can't even agree on who this Jesus guy is. Why should I listen to you? So the church recognizes that and says that. And then finally is Gaudium et Spes, incredibly boring document. I don't recommend you read it. But it's a document which the church sets out its goal for how it cares about the world, the kind of society it wants the world to be. It opens the joys and hopes, the griefs and the anxieties of the men of this age, especially those who are poor or in any way afflicted. These are the joys, the griefs and anxieties of the followers. We Catholics care about making the world a better place. It's not only about saving our souls to get to heaven. It's about making the world a better place, and we can work with non-Christians on doing it. And Gaudium et Spes goes on to affirm in paragraph 22, I think. This is a citation from it. All this holds true not only for Christians, but for all men of goodwill and grace works in none. It goes on to affirm that even non-Christians can receive the gift of salvation. So this is the framework under which I did my work. I believed that my Muslim, non-Catholic, Christian, and Jewish friends were good people who wanted to see the world improve, who cared about me and who cared about others. I showed them that I cared about them. The church affirms men of goodwill and women of goodwill working together to do good things for the earth. So this is the background. So I'm going to talk about types of dialogue. There are 4 types, which the church affirmed in a document in, I think, 71. All this stuff is pretty modern in church history because it's all after Vatican II. And it writes that there are 4 kinds. There is theological dialogue, which is what you think of, and what that is. The dialogue of religious experience, the dialogue of action, and the dialogue of life. And while I go through them, the one I want you to pay the most attention to is the dialogue of life. It's the most important one. It's the one we're going to talk about last because it's in some ways the easiest, but it's the most important one. And it's also not something you would think of always as being an act of Christian love, but it is. So, just before we get there, theological dialogue is when people of different faiths get together to discuss topics related to theology. So Catholics do this with non-Catholic Christians to work out our differences, to see if we can restore connection. I had the pleasure of engaging in this a little bit with Italians. And if Catholics and non-Christians can agree on this, then we can witness together and make our witness stronger. We do this with non-Christians to promote understanding and goodwill. This I used to do. At my last job, I went and engaged in a formal dialogue every month with some local Muslims to discuss topics like Eid, which is a Muslim holiday, Easter, is of course our highest holiday, or Eid al-Adha, sorry, there's multiple Eids. Topics like violence, topics like communion, community, those kinds of things. And you get together, and obviously, I'm going to be quoting from the Bible, and I'm going to be quoting from the teachings of the church, and Muslim people are going to be quoting from the Quran and the Hadith, but we still, can find similar values. Discuss our differences, and this should be done by a couple people. First of all, you should know your faith tradition well. If somebody's coming to you as an expert, you should feel comfortable acting as an expert. You should answer common questions about it, but also you need to be respectful to those who disagree. You're not going into this conversation being like, you're wrong, and I'm going to prove it. Your goal is to learn, and also to present what you believe, right? It's kind, basically. And the church has formal documents with this in general. The current Pope does a lot of work in particular with the Muslims of Al-Azhar, which is a place in Egypt, often viewed as the center of Sunni Islam. they do actual dialogues. The popes does this. The church does this part. There's also the dialogue of religious experience, which is your best frame of reference is, I know all of you participate in faith sharing. That's going to be your frame of reference. It's not exactly that, because like, you're not like, if you're not with a Catholic, if you're with a Baptist who doesn't believe the Eucharist is the real presence of Christ, you're not going to sit in front of adoration, doing adoration, and then go discuss that like you might in a faith sharing group. With a Baptist, you'll probably have to read the scriptures together. You know, and you can all, but in all religions, you can tell the stories of your life and where you found them. You know, like, and so basically, your goal is to sit and listen and learn. I was often invited to sit in the back of the mosque while they did their salat prayers. That's the 5 ritual daily prayers Muslims do. I was often invited to just sit in the back. They had chairs set out for non-Muslims who just wanted to watch. And I could, you know, sit there and watch them pray, be moved by their devotion and how cool Arabic sounds. And then, you know, we'd go and discuss. They would tell me about their experience praying. I would tell them what it was like to go to Mass. And we would have that conversation. But your goal is, like in normal faith sharing, your goal is to have a conversation and talk about how you're trying to be a better Christian. You know, I'm trying to follow Christ better by giving to the poor more. Those kind of things. Like, it's just you have to be willing to, that you might hear you're familiar with. There's also the dialogue of action, which you probably hear a lot about. I know, like, the interfaith group in Newton does some of this stuff. This is what we talked about in Gaudium et Spes. Catholics work with non-Catholics on issues we agree on. So, guided by Christ, we want to make the world a better place. Christ says again in the Gospel of Luke, Luke is our guide today. He says, "Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim a year favorable to the Lord." And he closed the book, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. And he began to say to them, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your." Christ made it his mission to proclaim liberty to captives, recovery of sight to the blind, a year acceptable to the Lord, good news to the poor, to help the poor. And it's not only Catholics who care about helping the poor. Pretty much every religion of the world cares about helping with the poor. Many Protestants care about helping the poor, and even many non-religious people care about things like homelessness and food insecurity. So it's great if we can do that with people who aren't Christian. You know, like if you get the opportunity to help at a soup kitchen that's run by Lutherans, not Catholics, that's great. Go out and do it. If you get the opportunity to make a stand for racial justice with local Muslims and Jewish people, that's great. Do it. We work together, and then we witness to Christ in this way. They'll know you're Christians by your love. Love is attractive. We do these good things. We stand up for the marginalized. We can, even when we do it with non-Christians, giving a shining example of who Christ is. And this last one is the dialogue of life, which is going to sound like, I'm going to sound kind of obnoxious in what I'm about to say, but it's really important. This refers to basically making friends and building relationships on personal levels with people who aren't. This is what I talked about when I made so many Muslim friends in Rochester. This is what, in college, I had a lot of friends who were just not religious at all, and I still talk to them all the time. Going to social events, you know, like if you get invited to the baptism of a non-Catholic friend's child, you know, say they're Episcopalian and they invite you to their child's baptism, go. Like, you know, you know, your friend is not religious at all and their kid graduates from high school and they invite you to the graduation party. Go. Like, it's in building these relationships that shows that we care about others that actually allows us to show who we are, that we care and we love. It's great to have friends who are Catholic, and I know the parish is incredibly supportive, and that's great too. But we can have friends who aren't Catholic too, and that's great. Sometimes they might have a different perspective on life that's useful to us. I've learned a lot from the Muslims I've spoken with about commitment to prayer, about commitment to justice, you know, because their tithing is way stricter than ours. I've talked about, you know, just like, and then you go, and this is the kind of thing where, like, as you build these relationships, eventually you get into the hard conversations we talked about before. They might ask you why you want to go to Mass on Sunday morning, and you know they respect you, and you can answer them honestly, right? It's just a bunch of, your goal is to show love, to build love, to grow toward others. You know, like, and then obviously you got to be respectful. If you're having a party and you invite, you know, people who can't eat pork, maybe you should have another food besides pepperoni. But like, but you know, this is the kind of thing where we just grow together. You know, your friends will then invite you over. Like, I would never have eaten a lot of the food that I ate in mosque under normal circumstances. This is really important, and it's not, like, you might not think that you're doing anything like that important. You're just making friends. But really, this is where we build the important relationships that let us do the other thing, like engage in theological dialogue or proclaim to the world that we support fighting. And you might think that all of this dialogue is contradictory to the mission of the church, which is to make disciples of Christ. But it's not. That's been kind of my point this whole time, is that building relationships and dialogue with people who are not Christians is not contradictory to our mission to build disciples. This is because evangelization is more than just going out and proclaiming Jesus Christ is the Son of the living God, which he is, and he died to save us and all that stuff. But there's more than that. By working and socializing, by getting to know people, we let them know we are Christians by our love. People will eventually be attracted to Christianity because love is attractive. And if you're loving, then people will want to be like you. And when you go into dialogue, people, like formal theological dialogue, people know that a possibility of conversion. Like, they know that that they will be attracted to the virtue in their compatriot, and that it might happen. Usually it doesn't, but it could, and people enter in will know. And of course, we always say the truth of what we believe. So the book I found that was the most helpful to me as I was getting started is this book right here. I brought it in for this. It's called Finding Jesus Among Muslims: How Loving Islam Makes Me a Better Catholic, by a woman named Jordan Denarita. She is a PhD student at Georgetown in Christian-Muslim relations. She works, and what this book is about how seeing the devotion of her Muslim friends helped her become a better Catholic, pray more often, pray more deeply, give more to the poor. And, you know, she never felt threatened to be, as a Catholic. Nobody ever forced her to be like, you got to become a Muslim now. She just knew that seeing their good works made her want to be more committed to following Christ. And I agree with that. My experience with people who are not Catholic has shown me the same. They've helped me become a better Catholic. A lot of the, like, you know, some of the prayer practices I've learned, Kathy, you mentioned Martin before. Some of the prayer practices I've learned have come from a Catholic priest who had been an Episcopal priest before becoming a Catholic priest, learning from Buddhists. You know, just we obviously we believe Jesus Christ has come to save us, and we shouldn't let go of that. But that doesn't mean we don't have things to learn from our non-Catholic friends. And if we only hold ourselves to talking to Catholics, we're going to cut ourselves off from all sorts of opportunities to learn and to experience holiness, to experience virtue in other people. That was basically what I wanted to say. So I'm going to stop screen sharing and we can have a discussion. Stop sharing. Do you have any questions about any of that, or any of you have any experience with non-Catholics that you might want to share, or would like to do that too?
I have a question, Nick.
Yeah.
I've heard the word Shoah,
Uh-huh.
S-H-O-A, but I don't know what it is.
Oh, it's just another word that is used to refer to the Holocaust. It's the same event.
Say that again. It's what?
It's another word that we use to refer to the Holocaust. It's the Holocaust.
Holocaust. Oh.
Sorry.
Those of us who are over the age of 60, shall we say?
Mhm.
We could.
Of the age of 70, maybe? We were brought up that only Catholics went to heaven.
Mhm.
I remember when I was about 8 or 9 years old, my campfire girl leader and my best friend's mother, I heard her say to her another mother, "I'm not a Catholic, I'm an Episcopalian." And I had no idea what an Episcopalian was. And the first thing, I remember being so shocked, that's my friend's mother and she's not going to go to heaven. I remember feeling awful about that. Because look, I was going to Catholic school and I was reading my catechism.
Mhm.
So this is a complete turnaround from what we were taught at that time.
Yeah. This is what the church believes, is that if people, through the grace of God, non-Catholics can go to heaven. I want you to believe it. Through the grace of God, non-Catholics can go to heaven.
I would think so. Some of them are good people. There's some very good people there, and
Yep.
maybe a lot better than some Catholics I know. Sure.
Exactly.
But that was, Kathy, was that what you were taught?
Well, I didn't go to parochial school, so I had a non-Catholic mother. So, so my experience is quite different. But
Yeah.
I was also reflecting a little bit when I was first married. It was just during Vatican II, and so there was a whole lot of dialogue in Newton, especially with people of different faiths. There was a clergy association. I remember when confirmation happened, a lot of the clergy from different temples and churches in Newton came to the big confirmation, because it was when, what's his name, had just been made a cardinal. Who was that?
Mackenzie?
Who?
Mackenzie or?
Oh, no.
Cushing.
We're talking the 70s.
Cushing.
Yeah. But Cardinal Law came to Sacred Heart for their confirmation. He spent the entire day with the kids. He had breakfast with them, he had classes with them, and they had confirmation in the middle of the afternoon. And that was a very high service with lots of different people in Newton in attendance, which I thought was fabulous. I remember we had Satyrs, to learn all of this stuff. Bishop Mackenzie was very active in that whole movement in Newton Center. Yeah, it was great. The more you know about anybody, the more you love them.
That's my point. Thank you for saying that. That's the whole point of the conversation.
But that was a very unusual. That's a Newton experience. I was in a number of different towns at the same time, having little boys, and we ended up in Connecticut. And I don't remember any confirmation where anybody came, except the confirmandi and their parents. It was never any. Did they start to get away from it after a while? We certainly have gotten away from it now.
Yeah.
I guess they just don't have time for it.
Yeah, the last thing I heard that the interfaith group in Newton did. I didn't go because of the virus. Like I didn't want to get sick. But there was a protest back in June for racial justice by the interfaith group in Newton.
Okay.
Which is like we talked about. We might not agree on all these topics of theology, but we agree that, Black people matter as much as white people. So
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So we get together to make that statement.
So the culture has to reflect what we believe.
Yes.
And sometimes the culture doesn't hold us up like we expect to.
Mhm.
I don't even want to bring the idea of women having more power in the church, because that's a whole different subject.
Mhm.
But it's a very real subject of allowing women to be fully present also.
Well, on the topic of women, just yesterday, Pope Francis hired 6 lay women to be on his economic council.
Right.
5 years.
Nobody from America.
No, 2 German women, 2 British women, and then 2 women from another country, but I don't remember what the third country was.
Yeah. Yeah. They're
So-
coming very slowly in the direction of allowing women. I mean, it's really not fair, because if you're an Episcopal priest married with children and you decide to leave the Episcopal priesthood and you're attracted to the Roman Catholic priesthood, you can be a Roman Catholic priest and married.
Mhm.
Because I know there's my home parish, which is in Dedham. There was a priest and his family living there.
Yeah, one of the best priests I've ever met was one of those. He was one of the guys who trained me in my early days of ministry. I've been doing this for only I'm starting my 4th year now. I'm starting my 5th year. I've done 4 years of work in the church. And one of the first priests I met who was training me, mentoring me, was an Episcopal priest, joined the Catholic priesthood, and they didn't make him divorce his wife.
This book we're reading for the summer, our Catholic Ladies Reading Group, at one point I said, well, this is why priests don't marry. He was busy heading off for his public life, and his wife couldn't go with him. And she ended up in Egypt, and he's having his public life. And I thought it would have been hard for him to be dragging a wife around with him too. But anyway, I said, well, maybe she's afraid to present him as a husband who went on his public ministry with his wife home cooking over the fire. I don't know, it wouldn't have worked very well. And she had one baby, but the baby died. Oh, I'm telling you, Peck hasn't read it yet.
Sure, but that's okay. I'm okay with spoilers.
Yeah, you're all right. But that would have been hard for him in this book to have a baby, because that would have been tough too. But anyway, it shows the reasons why they have a Catholic ministry that doesn't marry.
So, does anybody else have any other questions you might have? Anything I didn't talk about that you might want to know, or any experiences you have, like positive experiences making friends with non-Catholics? If you want to, I mean, questions or stories are great.
Well, I guess I would say my own experience going to a Catholic high school as a then non-Catholic, that the school was very welcoming, and it was kind of light on the theology, but definitely what was it, the lived experience, and what were those other categories?
There was religious experience, so talking about how you know God just in general, action, and then just life, just your normal lives.
Yeah, so life, action, and the experiences through the liturgies that we had. they always said that the non-Catholics could skip the masses and go to the library, but nobody went to the library. They would rather
Uh-huh.
be at the mass. So I think that says something
Yeah.
Yeah.
right there. And so it wasn't, partway through high school, I realized, oh, well, I'm going to be 18 soon. I can make my own decisions. And it was definitely the experience of the school,
Cool.
and the community that we had that was part of that whole evangelization. And I will say, as an aside, I went on a virtual retreat on Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a 5-hour Zoom thing, but
Wow.
there were breaks.
Yeah.
So what it was my high school principal, who I've been in touch with recently about things. I mean, I've never been not in touch with her, but we've recently become in touch about some specific, a common friend / relative that needs our help. So anyway, she invited me to the retreat, and so the retreat speaker, spoke for a little bit, and then we did small breakout rooms with Zoom. So it was like 5 or 6 people like this, just, faith sharing. And then, come back together and do some more things. And there were times when he said, well, don't leave the meeting, but just leave your computer and go sit someplace, and here's some things to reflect on.
Yeah.
But anyway, so afterwards, I think later that night, I called my teacher to ask her just kind of like, what did you think overall of the retreat, and just kind of a chance to catch up and everything. And she's been working, the high school just closed. She hadn't been affiliated with the high school for some years, but the archives got dumped on her. So she's busy sorting out the archives. And we were talking about the times when, when I was there and when she was principal, that, the focus was building community, and how she talked about how they did that and how that was so important to them. And, it worked, because here I am today. So I'm grateful to that. And it was just nice to be able to talk to her too.
Good. Good. So yeah, I mean, if you have any other, you can also just ask me questions about this stuff, just like not in the call. If you ever get any thoughts you have, I mean, this interreligious dialogue is a topic I know well. I did it, I worked in it, and I studied it, and I still do when I'm bored. I do readings, I have, by my Muslim friends, I was given a copy of the Quran that I still have. If you have other questions that you might think of afterward, you can send me an email. I will answer your questions on this topic. The reason I wanted to do this was because most of the time you guys don't see a lot of my personality. You just see me running around doing stuff. So I wanted to do this to give you all an opportunity to know a little bit more about the person I am. So
Very, very important.
So anyway, I mean, I don't have anything else. So.
You're the perfect age for it, because you were born probably in the 60s, around the time.
No, I wasn't born in the 60s. I was born after the 60s. But
Right.
but
Yeah,
I was,
that's right. That would make. So you.
Put in perspective, I was born in the 60s.
Yeah, right. When were our kids born, Pat?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yes,
So
I grew up.
you grew up with the Vatican too. I mean, you didn't hear the old stuff that we heard. Those of us were.
When I was 4 or 5, my parents would just drop me off at my friend's house, and then we'd go to Episcopal church because they weren't Catholic, right? They'd be like, "You're with them this weekend, and you're going to church with them," right? So.
Well, we weren't even allowed to go into Protestant churches. I remember my campfire girls used to have ceremonies at the Methodist church, not too far away, and I felt like I was in a very bad, not bad place, but a strange place where I didn't belong, because I had been told we couldn't go to weddings if they were held in a Protestant church. It was pretty strong rules there.
Yeah. Now,
Pat, where did you grow up?
In Dedham.
Right here in Dedham. Huh? See, I grew up in Pepperell, which is the hinterland of the parish. And we had a lot of sickly priests, but we weren't given that kind of indoctrination. You know, if a friend was getting married, you could go to the Congregational church. I remember my mother saying she asked the priest, could they go to a baptism in another church? I mean, Mom is not a Catholic, so she's asking the priest. We lived on the same street as the church. And he said, of course it's all right. You don't want to give scandal by not going to another Christian. So, you know, so some of them were better educated as priests, maybe.
Right.
But
for me, it's very much like my experience in my lifetime. It's like, you want to go to any baptism, your friend is getting married in a Protestant church, go. The only wedding I've ever been in, like as a member of the wedding party, was in a Protestant church. Like,
yeah,
no.
yeah. I
Peggy,
mean, for one thing, one of the big reasons oh, Karen, I'm sorry, did I hop over you?
oh, I wanted to ask Peggy what her experience was growing up. You grew up in Erie, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, as we're talking, I'm trying to think, did I have non-Catholic friends? Oh, yeah. I went to public high school and everything was there, everybody, you know.
Yeah.
It was a real mixture of people, in fact, not just religious-wise, but ethnically. It was a high school, it was a school that was in both, you know, a lot of middle of the road people like me, and some very wealthy people, and some very poor people, and some African American people. And one of my best friends, who lived a couple blocks from me, she was very narrow-minded and still is. And we were at a class reunion, I think it was the 10th reunion, and this African American friend of mine came running over and hugged me, and she said afterwards, we were talking, she said, "Who was that?" You know, just bleh. His father was a trash collector. But so the school had everything, religious-wise and ethnically, and so I never thought too much about people from other religions because I knew everybody from other religions.
It's great.
I don't know if I'm making any sense. I kind of.
No, you're saying I went to public school too, and that's how it was for me.
But did you go to other
did.
people's,
It can't,
Peggy, did you go to other people's religious celebrations?
Yeah, we did.
I
I went
mean,
to Catholic grade school for 8 years, but then I couldn't afford to go to the Catholic high school. So I was only one of 3 people from my grade school, or from my grade school class, that went on to public high school. So that was hard, you know. My brother-in-law, who died a few years ago, was still teasing me till the day he died about, oh, it's so hard to make friends, because I was so worried about going to a different school. I was just a wreck about it. So a lot of my friends, most of my friends from high school were non-Catholic.
and then I think about here growing up in Newton, like all our kids, at least in my kids' generation, they all went to all the bar mitzvahs and all the bat mitzvahs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah.
That was a big event. They, you know, my kids wanted one. You know?
Yeah.
I still remember my husband fighting that we had to have confirmation at that age of 13 because the Jewish kids were doing it. It was just when the Catholic Church was trying to change it to keep them in CCD, and they were trying to move it out to 15 or 16.
Yeah.
There was a renegade crowd at Sacred Heart where they confirmed about maybe 12 when they were 13, and they kept the rest of the class longer. You know, it's interesting as we reflect. When I think I was in a high school, very many of my teachers two of them anyway had been priests who had left the order, and one definitely was a nun. So some of our best educated people were teachers who had been educated in the church.
Yeah.
So they were very supportive, a lot of CYO. Because I was in a small town. CYO was my life. We would, you know, we got into Boston. We went to the Red Sox games. We, you know, went to Nantasket. Yeah, people were awfully good to us. The church was a huge piece of my life because it was a huge social piece as well. But, you know, we didn't just take Catholics with us.
We didn't have CYO.
Yeah,
What
even when I was in my teens, 10 people.
Well, you know what is interesting to me? I feel even my mission in joining the Guild when I joined Sacred Heart was kind of that outreach so that everybody would see we were Catholics and what good we could do for the community. And I still wish we could keep publishing a little bit more, that we're collecting for this food drive, that, you know, all the good works that get done in the place. And just sort of brag about ourselves so people might say, hey, they're worth looking into. And you know me, I like the lights on the church at Christmas so people know there's Christians here. I'd still like to light Sacred Heart so that people know there's a church there at night. So, you know, I think it's all this stuff that make people enjoy you or think about joining the church, or just by being nice to people.
Kathy, I will affirm you, everyone at the parish agrees that you do a good job of welcoming people.
Well,
About you.
I think there's so many of us doing it at Sacred Heart.
So, yeah, Peggy, I appreciated that you're saying you grew up in Erie. I have a couple of good friends out there. I got to see them a few weeks ago before it got really bad. And they actually were talking about, she was telling me the story of growing up and just, you know, she was Catholic and is very Catholic, you know, but a lot of her friends were just like, yeah, no, I'm not. She was like, I had friends who weren't Catholic and I didn't always understand what was going on. You know, my Muslim friends weren't eating because it was Ramadan. I didn't know what was going on, but I would be like, all right, I know you're hungry, so I won't eat either, right? I could hear my friend's story about Erie and what you were saying.
Actually, I didn't know any Muslims growing up.
I didn't either. I knew a lot in college, but I grew up in a suburb in Connecticut, and not any Muslims. But I met a lot of them in college, and then a lot of them in college, because they just like, I went to Fairfield University, a Jesuit school like BC, and a lot of like Jesuit schools as Catholic schools go have a higher percentage of Muslims than other schools. The best
Not in my day. No, I don't know any Muslims really that I know of, but sometimes I don't know when anybody is.
Of course. But today, apparently, the best Christian Muslim school in the country is Georgetown.
No kidding.
Yeah. So, you know, it's changed. But I mean, I'm younger than you
I
guys.
like those Jesuits.
I graduated from college 4 years ago. So.
Oh, good. How could you be that young?
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, this was good. I enjoyed this conversation. But
I did too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Take care. All right. Enjoy the rest of the summer, everybody.
You too.
Stay cool.
Bye.
Hopefully
Recording.
we'll be back together soon.
I hope so.
Yeah, that would be nice. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.